And it becomes a reflection on the nature of Jesus' very own life and Jesus' own mission, which he reaches to with his death on a cross. The passage invites people to reflect on the meaning of Jesus' life and the death and the role we play in continuing the mission of Jesus. Now, we've talked before of stories of hens. This hen is protecting her very ugly chicks. They're very regular, I suppose. And she's huddling them from a big rainstorm, you can see. But we've talked in the past of stories where you have bush crews cleaning up after a big fire, and they'll knock something over, and it's the husk of a hen, and then little chicks will go running out from underneath the husk of the body, because a mother hen is actually built by God in such a way that when a fire overwhelms a forest, if she has her chicks tucked properly under her, they can survive despite the fire. Now, I haven't done any research on this, but I like to think that Jesus is familiar with this kind of image, and maybe even the fire one, and he likened himself to the hen. We think of Jesus as a lion sometimes or a lamb sometimes, but the hen is a whole other thing. In one sense, Jesus does protect us like the hen, saves us, gives us our life back, like the mother hen to the chicks, but he does it more greatly and more fully, for we don't run out from under his wings now motherless, but we run out from under his wings transformed into whole new beings with an opportunity to play a role in his kingdom, human beings meant for eternity without fear, without tears, a world where Jesus is still alive despite what might have been the case. But one of the remarkable qualities of this story that always gets to me, or always intrigues me, is that I've never heard anybody be remotely bothered that Jesus uses a feminine analogy for who he is. The Lion of Judah becomes a mother hen. And nobody bats an eye, because we're so interested in other parts of the story. But the idea that Jesus would take on the feminine, I find very intriguing. And I think there's a sense in which following Jesus has often meant treating people the way good mothers treat people. So this slide that's up now is from the recent General Assembly. They're going to be meeting starting tonight, the General Assembly. I'm not going to be there. There will be lots of singing at it. There will be praying, there will be preaching, there's going to be stories told of congregations doing well, congregations that are struggling, there's going to be ecumenical guests, groups from other faiths. There will be many debates about the state of the church, where we are today, where we're going, and what we might do about it. But one element of the meeting that will not be remarkable to most people is that it will be full of women. The moderator is Lara Scoli from Montreal. Many of the preachers that will open and close the days will be women, and of course, many of the commissioners who speak and vote will be women. There was a time when this was not true, and tonight will mark 60 years to the day when the General Assembly voted that it would be the last womanless General Assembly. When they voted to have women become elders and ministers, it was very interesting because it was all ready to go. What they were doing was recognizing that women were already doing the work of God. So they voted one week, and literally the next week, congregations held elections and ordained women as elders in their congregations. Not all of them, but some of them. And then that fall, there were several women who entered into the seminary and went through the seminary process to become ordained. They were ready. They were waiting for this vote to happen, and as soon as it happened, actions or plans were put into action. I think the simple truth is that the women have always been in leadership roles. They've always been capable of ministry in God's people, and in many ways uniquely gifted to fulfill the needs of God's people. I think when Jesus outlandishly does this thing and says, I'm going to be a hen now, he hinted at something like this. One of my favorite stories, there was a lot of debate about this, as you can imagine. They were fighting, right? And this kindly gentleman stood up at the 61st General, like the next year. And he said, I have a question about a point of order for how we're going to do the business of General Assembly this year. And everybody gets nervous because clearly this is going to be about the role of women and how we're going to do whatever. And they're expecting some gnarly, disappointed, opposed person to be talking. And this guy stands up and he says, moderator, I was raised that when a woman enters a room, you stand up to show her respect, and politeness requires I do that. And in the history of the General Assembly, we, by tradition, all rise every time a woman enters the room. I merely want to pose the question and propose a solution that we could just rise once right now to respect all the women in the room and then not have to do it every time one of them enters or leaves the room. Some people were quick to get on board with the idea that there were going to be women in the room and figure out, how do we just do this? How do we just move forward and make it work nicely? And since then, many women have done a lot of things for our churches. The next slide here is two of our women ministers here in Ottawa. These two I wanted to talk about very briefly. Denise Allen McCartney, her congregation was about as moribund as you can imagine, as close to closing and having controversy after controversy, and it was just basically a total disaster. She's been there for 16 years, and now they often have over 45 kids at their worship service, over 150 in regular attendance. They reach out to the school that's across the street from their building. They are one of the most incredible turnaround stories in our denomination, cared for tenderly by Denise, who on her pulpit has a big sticker that just says, smile like crazy, you wanted to be here. Rain is at St. Timothy's in Alta Vista, another church that's been through the ringer, another church that was having a very difficult time. She went there being paid half-time and working certainly more hours than I do. And now they are on the verge of next year. She will be paid full-time after years of diligent work, growing a very multicultural congregation, and again, being an incredible turnaround story for our presbytery. We take so much hope when we see congregations go from virtually dead in the water to seeing God working in and through women like Denise and Rain, getting things done that quite a few men tried to do without any success whatsoever. And then we have our bigger and older churches. The next slide is of two leaders here. Karen Dimmick preaches every week straight across from the Supreme Court of Canada, letting Mr. Carney and the rest know what she thinks of what's going on in the world. And Liz Chen leads St. Paul's on Woodruff here, one of our older, larger congregations. Again, both of these preachers serve the denomination in big ways that are impossible to ignore and are so appreciated, and we need people like them. And it's really nice, I find, to be in a presbytery where a lot of the best, most talented and respected people at presbytery are in fact women. Some of you will remember Karen. She was the interim moderator here before I came. She's the only woman ordained minister that we find in our track record here. So eventually, if I get hit by a bus, you might think about looking at women as a possible solution. The next slide is our first female elder. This is Mary Montgomery. She was elected in 1968. There's been 40 women elders since Mary. I will take the time to name them. Do you know the Old Testament has these long, beautiful lineages? Some of you hate this stuff, I know it. But this is an example of why they're there. Why it might actually be useful to just have a list of names. Because to some people they're going to mean something. So we're going to remember some of them. Some of them we know. So if you are here, stand up when I say your name and stay standing till we're done. And some of them we will have known and we can thank God for them. And others we might have never heard of, but we can be grateful that they stepped into a role. So here's the 40 women that followed Mary Montgomery. You got Brenda Abbott, Susan Ambrose, Jessie Bailey, Vivian Bertrand, Betty Jean Bone, Lynn Carroll, Debbie Chadsey, Brenda Chapman, Maureen Clearly, Beth Clough, Marlene Dance, Betty Fraser-Smith, Jean Gard, Barb Gibson, Sherry Goldsmith, Isabel Gow, Betty Gwynn, Mabel Jameson, Caroline Joyner, Clerk of Session, Laura Kilgore. She's not here, right? Clerk of Session now, Robin Lawfrey, Mary McKenzie, Heather McCurdy, Catherine Mackay, Shirley Mackay, Ina McMahon, Audrey Miller, Debbie O'Hara, Remy Parmar, Mildred Patterson, Marg Quinney, Pam Ramsey, Shirley Sandziak. It's a pretty long list. Julie Stock, I think you're here today. Shirley Stubbs, Ginny Thompson, Sharon Tinkus, Marianne Tyler, Susan Weiss, and Leslie Wood. When it comes to being a congregation that has embraced this, you have these women that have done these roles, and we can give thanks for them. You can sit. I just wanted to point out they're there. And our next slide is something you might have walked by a few times now and not really noticed. The Women of Faith Award was established by the Presbyterian Church in Canada, the Women's Missionary Society, and the Order of Diaconal Ministries around 2012. It was meant to honor the courageous and faithful work of women within our church and to share individual stories of women in ministry. Over the years, it was presented to only 12 women. Women of Faith Awards were created not only to honor the recipients at a national level, but also to encourage congregations and groups to think about and share the stories of faithful women who have served the church. Many do so quietly behind the scenes and will never get an award. This display, you might have noticed it, you might not have. It's actually really recent that we put this up. We've been trying to get it done for a while, but now it's there so you can see it on your way out. It notes our congregation's track record here. The PCC has over 850 congregations. You are part of a relatively large bunch of people. Like I said, only 12 people have gotten the award, and 2 are from our groups. I'm going to read to you just straight from the nominations that won these awards because we want to share the story. So about Doreen McDougall, it was written, Doreen's a Presbyterian since 1940s. Was a faithful disciple of Christ all her life. She was raised in Erskine Church. She was active in Sunday school, Bible class, youth group, Canadian Girls in Training, and choir. It was there she met her husband Jim at the Young People's Group, and they were married for 54 years and had 2 children. She began teaching at the age of 13, serving both as a nursery helper and an instructor in a boys' grade 1-2 class. By the age of 17, she was a CGIT leader and went on to become a Presbyterian representative on the Ottawa CGIT committee almost 20 years later. As an adult, she took on leadership roles at Erskine. She continued to help with nursery and Sunday school. She also served on a number of committees, listen to this, Mission and Outreach, Worship and Nurture, Christian Education, Pastoral Care, Congregational Life, and various search committees. In the 80s, she became an elder, calling that she accepted with reverence and respect. She cited serving communion as a traditional and sacred ritual, as the church work that brought her the most fulfillment. It was as clerk of session that she faced the most challenging and possibly painful time in her church life. With declining numbers, the congregation made the decision to close Erskine Church. When Erskine began to struggle with declining membership, Doreen was part of a group that wrestled with the question, how does God want this ministry to continue? The closing of a church building is a painful process, and while Doreen must have been facing her own difficulties, she's remembered by all who knew her at the time as one who supported the people of Erskine during their process of letting go and their grief. The members of the Erskine were a family, They had met and married spouses there. They had raised their children there, and they were closest of friends. Doreen helped them to move to another church building, recognizing that this was not a negation of what Erskine had been or what they had accomplished. For the good of the congregation, Doreen focused on the transition plan and amalgamation with Westminster on relationships rather than buildings. Doreen supported people around her with strength, patience, integrity, common sense, and compassion. She was particularly known for her remarkable ability to recognize the strengths of others and help them find their way. I like to think that's pretty great because our little slogan there, we take all kinds, and we talk about, we do that by celebrating unique gifts, finding them, identifying them, strengthening them, putting them to use. Sounds like she was at it a long time before Bruce came up with our line. Doreen joined the session at Westminster, and with the care of the Erskine people was uppermost in her mind. Still, she was faithful in speaking for those who had recently amalgamated and made sure to look after their needs. She was equally sensitive to the needs of the people of Westminster and provided direction throughout the amalgamation process. In short, she brought two families together. Her own great faith allowed her not only to move somewhere new, but also to lead people through that process. Doreen was a witness to Christ's gospel all her life. She talked about the wonderful role models she had had, like Jean Phillips, who mentored her as a young woman and strengthened her commitment for God's work. She said it was through her mentors that she was then able to pay it forward, sharing her gift of leadership and becoming a mentor herself. She exemplified the selflessness that faith demands of us. And so with that and other elements, she won the award. The year that Audrey Miller won it, there were 47 nominees. So here's what was written about Audrey. 82 years ago, Audrey Miller was born in Ottawa. As a child, she attended Parkdale United Church with her family, and it is there that she began her lifelong service to others and to the glory of God. Audrey's faith led her to British Columbia, where she studied at the Naramata Center and where she met Bill Miller. They were married in 1961, joined this church in 1962. That's a lot of years ago. Audrey and Bill had two children, Glenn and Carol Ann. They had a traditional family life, with Audrey staying home to raise the children, Bill working to provide for the family, and their faith has always been strong. God has invariably helped them through some difficult times and taken care of their needs. In turn, Audrey and Bill always maintained an open-door policy at the home. The Millers have always offered their hearts and God's love to everyone who comes their way, with a welcome, an extra chair at the table, and more warmth than words can describe. In her youth, Audrey joined CGIT, which gave her a firm footing for an incredible life of service. In CGIT, Audrey became a group leader, a member of Ottawa CGIT Committee, representative on the National CGIT Association. She's always had a special interest in youth ministry and threw herself into CGIT wholeheartedly with great enthusiasm, becoming a friend and mentor to many girls over 5 decades. Mentoring, both women. At Westminster, she served others. She was a Sunday school teacher, a superintendent, a chairperson of the worship and nurture, the Christian education team. She is actively involved in the pastoral care team, the mission outreach team, and she was a dedicated elder for 25 years. Oh, and she was the president of the Westminster Women's Missionary Society multiple times. You notice the trend that it takes me more than one hand to list the committees these ladies have been involved in. This is how the church operates. Audrey initiated ministries. She became an integral part of the life of the congregation. She was committed to a life of prayer. She started both Congregational Prayer Chain, a prayer partners program which matches seniors with youth in the church. Additionally, she gave countless hours of time and support to one of Ottawa's inner city drop-in centers, Center 507. One summer, she organized a team to make cheese sandwiches. That ministry continued over 25 years. Audrey's an enthusiastic organizer, planner, promoter, teacher, baker, knitter, leader, nurturer, and friend, whose tireless work benefited Westminster, the Center 507, and the wider community. Her prayer and pastoral work have brought hope and healing to many people. She's clearly an example of the living church. Audrey's smile makes all the people she meets feel like they are the most important people in the world, and to her, they were. This is her capacity for love. She serves others because she is interested in others. She wants the best for them. She sees good in people, and even when they have lost sight of it themselves. Again, there's an awful lot of overlap here. Through Audrey's nurture and friendship, people have found God. In 2007, Audrey suffered a brain aneurysm, and she was not expected to live. Her doctors literally described her survival as a miracle. And when she talked about it, she would say, "Why did the Lord keep me here? I don't know, but I'd better do it." James 1:22 tells us, "Be doers of the word, not hearers only." Audrey exemplified it. Her health declined in later years. She was less active than she would like, but she continued with her muffin ministry, prayer for others. And then they wrote this when they applied for the grant. So last week I dropped into Audrey's house to visit her and found Audrey knitting a scarf. It's my 7th one this year. She said, "It's for the people at 507. It's all I can do now." When asked about her many ministries, she says, "I think God can do more with us if we would just let him." It's not stories of women working super hard, although it sort of is. It's stories of women following God's lead and God working in our lives through them. I can tell you, I've heard many people say that they are here because they came here and Audrey Miller said hello and welcomed them when they came. It's not that surprising that another female elder, Beth Clough, said, "Why don't we get better at welcoming people when they come in the door?" And thinking through, how do we do that well? Because it matters. When you welcome people in, you're welcoming them into a journey of faith. You don't know where they're from. You don't know what state their faith is in. You don't know what state their lives are in, but you can welcome them. When we celebrate the gifts and the contributions of any of our members, we do it remembering that God works in us and through us. God provides the church with the people it needs. And it does it even when you don't think you're up for it. The history of the church is full of people who don't really know what they're doing. I find it fun to go to Presbytery and realize how little people know about what they're actually doing. And yet God works in it and through it, and somehow we keep going. Paul wrote about the church needing all sorts of gifts and all sorts of people. If the church was going to accomplish what God wanted it to accomplish, and Paul said, of course it will accomplish that, because God will see to it. It will only work when everyone's gifts are recognized and affirmed and put to use for the kingdom of God. The impact, the fruit, the growth of it all is not up to us. What is up to us is to follow God's generous lead, to love him as he calls us to, and to love others as he calls us to, and to give thanks to him when we see him at work among us. I'm going to invite you to stand. We've done this once or twice before, but there's this responsive liturgy for women that I think is just really great. So I'm going to get you to stand, and we'll do it together with the screen. So I'll read the top, and you're going to read the bottom. We walk in the company of women who have gone before, mothers of the faith, both named and unnamed. They are the judges, the prophets, the martyrs, the warriors, poets, lovers, and saints. We walk in the company of Deborah. We walk in the company of Esther. We walk in the company of you whose names have been lost and silenced. We walk in the company of the woman with the flow of blood. We walk in the company of Mary Magdalene. We walk in the company of Phoebe. We walk in the company of Perpetua of Carthage. We walk in the company of Saint Christina the Astonishing. We walk in the company of Julian of Norwich. We walk in the company of Sojourner Truth. We walk in the company of the Argentine mothers of the Plaza de Mayo. We walk in the company of Alice Walker. We walk in the company of you, mothers of faith. Amen. Please stay standing for our next hymn.